Hello and welcome to the Music Survival Guide, the independent musician's guide on how to survive in the music industry. My name is Phil, a mixing and mastering engineer. Hope you're doing very fine and dandy on this fine and dandy day. I'm never going to say that again. So anyway, on this week of the podcast, I am chatting with Sam Bloor, who owns Lower Lane Studios in Stoke-on-Trent. He's also a great producer. If you just got to listen to anything in his discography, and you'll know, and you'll very quickly learn if you don't know, that he's really good at getting the very best out of bands. He's really good at finding the kind of the essence of a song and just helping a band kind of really bring that to germination. Check me out with my interesting phraseology. So we discuss all sorts of things this week. We discuss things like effective collaboration with bands and why that's really important, coming into the studio with an open mind, and why often he'll go about recording drums last. Maybe not something you've heard before. And I'm just going to say, on with the interview. So today on the podcast, I am joined by Sam, who is a producer and the owner of Lower Lane Studios. Sam, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm very good, yeah. Quite warm up here, actually, in my little den.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be one of those days, but there we are.
Yeah, no, I'm also working from home today, just catching up on a few mixes and stuff. So, yeah, nice to catch up.
Good times. So my first question, as always, is from an online random question generator, and this is one of the most weirdly on-the-nose kind of questions I've ever seen on there. What are you having for dinner tonight?
I am going... No, I do know, actually, because I was just talking to my wife about this, and I'm going to make a curry tonight, because one of my other passions, besides making music, is making curry. So I said to Hannah this morning, I was like, I haven't made a curry in ages, and I haven't got much on this afternoon, so I think I'm going to get in the kitchen, get in there for a few hours, and make something nice. So I'm feeling... what was I thinking of doing? I might make a lamb karahi, which is going to take a few hours to stew down. So yeah, I'm kind of in the mood to make a curry. I think there's some parallels there between making music and making curry. It's very detail orientated and takes time, and it takes time to learn how to get good at making curry. So I've been doing that since lockdown, really, and that's my other kind of outlet, I guess. So yeah, weird question, but yeah, I do know what I'm having.
That's good. I have one curry recipe in my back pocket that works, and I sometimes try and throw other spices in it, and it's sometimes gone horrifically wrong. Yeah,
it's tricky. It's tricky. Once you've got one that works, I've got a couple of crowd pleasers, and it's hard to get away from those, really. And you go and you try another one, and it's not quite as good. But yeah, the restaurant Dishoom. It's an Iranian sort of restaurant, and we've got one in Manchester, and I make their chicken ruby, which is their take on, I guess, a tikka masala, and that just goes down an absolute treat, such a crowd pleaser. So I seem to do that more often, but I'm feeling like I want to do something a bit different today, so I want to take my time.
Nice. So, for my first kind of real question, I guess, how did you get into music in the first place?
I mean, I've always been into music. Even as a kid, I was obsessed with the Spice Girls and stuff like that. I think I've always had an interest in music, but I started playing guitar when I was really young, maybe around 10 or 11, something like that. But it never really made any sense. I had some guitar lessons, and we were doing finger picking exercises and things like that. I was like, okay, this is cool, but it doesn't really make much sense for me. I don't really like this kind of music. And then I think around 12, 13, started getting into more dad rock stuff that my dad was listening to, Foo Fighters, Stereophonics. But my dad was actually a Placebo fan as well, and they're still one of my favorite bands today. But then after that, I kind of start finding your own sort of taste in music. Really got into My Chemical Romance, Avenged Sevenfold, stuff like that. And it was all hearing music on Tony Hawk's, or I remember hearing Avenged Sevenfold on this Need for Speed game. And I just was like, what is this? I was like, what is this music? I don't understand what this even is. I'm hearing sounds, but at the time I was probably into Eminem or like Akon or something. And then I just heard Avenged Sevenfold and I was like, what? I was like, what are these sounds? And then I realized that like I could like pick up this guitar that I had in the corner that I'd been doing like finger picking exercises on. I was like, oh, I can like play this music. So I started learning. I just remember like spending like all summer learning like My Chemical Romance and Taking Back Sunday and Avenged Sevenfold and just going through tabs on the internet. And that's when I got like really into playing music. And then, it just goes from there, doesn't it? And I got really into like screamo and metalcore and getting into like Parkway Drive and Bring Me the Horizon and all those kind of things. Like I think you can tell my age by those bands, right? So it's like very much like a MySpace era coming of youth story. So like 2008, left school, and I think it was like, all those bands were like huge at that time. So there was just an abundance of like inspiration, really, and I just got really, really into learning songs on the guitar, and then I just started playing in bands like really, really early. I remember playing, shows like even like at school when I was like 14 or 15, playing in little bands at school. And then I think by the time I left school, by the time I was like 16, 17, we were playing like, proper shows, like proper venues and stuff. So I was doing it really early, actually. Like when I think about it now, like when I look back, like I was on stage from 15, 16. So I just got into it that way. And the first couple of times, obviously, we went to the recording studio. I just fell in love with that as well. So yeah, I think always had a passion for music.
I don't know what it was about game soundtracks of the early 2000s, but they were full of that kind of music, weren't they? They all were. It's amazing.
Yeah, so good. I love all like the tribute bands now that do stuff like that. Like I think there's a band from Birmingham called the 900 who do like all the Tony Hawk's soundtrack songs and stuff. And I just think it's it's really cool. I don't know if has there really been another wave of that? Like I don't know if there's ever been like another era as defining as that. I'm not sure. I feel really lucky to have grown up in that, actually. Like the music was just incredible around that era, and watching certain bands just absolutely explode. And we've got a really great venue here called the Sugar Mill, and I've seen some incredible bands come through Stoke, like you wouldn't believe, like and the bands that we've played with as well, like as kids, so like my band opened for like we were kids, like 17, 18. We opened for like Don Broco, Lone Atlantis, While She Sleeps. It's just like the list goes on and on and on and on. And it's like, that's absolutely ridiculous. The amount of bands that we've seen come through and play to like 10 people, But it's always been, I loved playing in bands, and I played in bands until I was about 28. So I probably did a good 15 years on stage. But obviously the studio just kind of outweighed that eventually. Like the love for being in the studio just kind of like won, I guess.
So yeah, on that note, how did you get into music production? What was your kind of route into this crazy world?
It's it's very similar to everyone's story, really. It's like you go to the studio for the first time. I think we went to the studio when I was like 16, 17, and I just don't know, I just had a feeling. I was like, that's me. I saw the guy there and I was like, it was like looking into the future. I was like, that guy is me. And he's like, because I was the kind of kid in the band who was like actually interested in getting the guitar tone right and actually interested in getting the song right and playing around with the arrangement. And I was always the songwriter, and I was, doing the lyrics and the melodies, and I was just that guy. I guess it was just like, part of it was just very natural. So I think when you're that interested and you go to the studio, you're always going to have like a temptation to kind of like do it yourself or try and cut out the middleman. So I kind of started doing that when I was about 19, something like that. Got a little iMac for the first time and locked myself away and started learning how to use it, and did demos for my own band and started recording friends' bands. At that time, I didn't have a studio space or anything like that, so I just used to have like a portable rig that I could take everywhere with me. So it all fit in the back of my car, and we'd go and hire like a church hall or community centre or a college studio or a band practice space or just anywhere that we could find. And like I started making all these little DIY records with friends' bands basically. And it kind of stemmed from there, and it just grew and grew and grew. And I think I was just known locally as like that guy. You know, it's like I think every city has like that guy who, you know, especially in like smaller cities anyway, you know what I mean? I think London's got hundreds of those guys. But I think when you come from like Stoke-on-Trent, it's like I've been doing this now for like 10 years, and there's like been very few people kind of come after me. And there was very few people in front of me as well. It was like all the other guys who had studios, like when I started, were like 50. So there was like a 30 year gap between us, you know, so there wasn't really this like plethora of people like making records. So I think like when someone in the 20s, you know, starts taking a real interest in this, you just kind of get known as being like that kid who can make cheap recordings, and you don't have to go to a major studio. So yeah, I just got into it that way, and I had a few failed attempts. You know, I had a few studios that like didn't work out, and little band practice spaces that were turned into studios, and we'd get kicked out or moved on, and it kind of just, yeah, it was just sticking it out. I think if I started when I was like 18 or 19, I didn't open my studio until I was 22 or 23. So there was about a 4-year sort of window of like really trying to get it off the ground and feeling like it wasn't going anywhere, and you know, making sort of like 2 or 3 records a year, kind of ad hoc. And then yeah, I just remember so many times like getting a studio space, being really excited, painting the walls, putting the acoustic treatment in, doing one session, and then getting kicked straight out, you know, for like noise complaints. And I did that like 3 or 4 or 5 times. Like we had like so many failed attempts in the beginning, and then I found what I thought was the perfect location, and just went for it. And I'm still there today. So I guess the location was right in the end. But yeah, that's
not been kicked out yet.
No, thankfully. Touch wood. Let's not tempt fate, right?
Yeah. Oh, no, I know. Is it quite a daunting thing at 22, 23, opening a studio? I mean, I guess we're used to it by then with your repeated attempts, but
no. You know what? I've said this a few times actually. I think opening it so young was a real blessing because, one, you're very, very naive, and like you're just hungry for it, and you don't really weigh up the risks. And also you don't have much to lose. Like I didn't have anything to lose. You know, I was at home with my mum. I had like a little part-time job. I had a little car, and that was it. Like what's going to happen if it fails? Nothing really. You know, your pride's hurt, but apart from that, like, does it, you know, it doesn't really matter. It's more daunting trying to start one now. You know, I've got a house and a kid and a wife, and it's like, can you imagine leaving a job where you had like a salary and a pension and holiday pay and sick pay, and being like, I'm going to quit and start recording bands for a living? You know, bands that like notoriously, you know, pay late, don't show up when they're supposed to, stuff gets rearranged and pushed all around. And it's like, can you imagine doing that like after having the security of a job? Like, that's terrifying. But doing it like 21, 22, it was exciting, but it wasn't really daunting. I think it's the best time to do it, really. Like when I've got an assistant called Johnny Price, and when he started interning for me, he was in the same position. I think he was only working like 1 day a week or something like that. And I was like, just hang on to that job for a little bit longer. Try and make your audio career work before you commit to having a proper job, you know, because you've got nothing to lose at that point. You know, it's a brilliant place to be. You've got so much power, but as soon as you start like renting a property or getting a mortgage or getting a full-time career, then it suddenly becomes quite easy to quit audio, I think, at that point, because it's quite the allure of full-time salary is definitely tempting. And I've even after years and years and years of being in the studio, you sometimes think to yourself, like, oh, it'd be nice to have sick pay and stuff like that. But you get really used to the uncomfortability of it all. And I kind of thrive in that sort of uncertainty, to be honest with you. Like, I think I really rely on that now to like keep me motivated. So it's I actually like it. I think I do like it now. But in the beginning, you don't really think about it. You just get stuck in and do the job, But,
Back on. So say a band contacts you saying they want to work with you out of the blue. What happens next? What's the next steps for you?
Well, I'm definitely going to be checking out previous releases. If there isn't anything out there in the world, I'm going to ask for demos, even if it's just like a phone recording. Because really at this point, I'm trying to weigh up, whether I think I'm right for the project, whether I think I can bring anything to the table, whether I think they're like ready to sort of work with me on that level, because everyone needs different input. Some bands are looking for just a straight recording, just want to come in, record what they've got, get it done as fast as possible, cheap as possible. And I think like for me, after like 10 years of being in the industry, that's not necessarily like where my like heart is at the moment. I'm really more about like the quality over quantity. So it's just about like figuring out like where they are at the moment. If they're like really young, they're like 16, they've never done a recording before. Maybe I'm not the right choice for that straight away because, one, it's probably going to be quite expensive for them. And two, I think it's if they've never been to the studio before and then they come in and I start tearing the song apart and changing everything, I think it could be quite overwhelming for like a young bunch of kids. So normally, if that's the case, I'll set them up with my assistant first, and then they can kind of come in, learn the ropes, get a feel for the studio, and then it might be that like once they've kind of like cracked that and spent a couple of years there, then maybe they'll like move through the ranks, as it were. And me and Johnny have done like some sessions where like he's kickstarted it and then we've then worked on it together, and then eventually I work on it and then he assists me with it. So they kind of like work their way up through the studio. We've got like different sort of entry levels, I guess. Or if a band gets in touch and they're like a touring band, national band that are doing considerable streams and all that kind of stuff, and there's real potential there, then we'll have a chat about doing figure out what they want, whether they need help with writing, pre-production, additional input like that, or whether they just want to come in, get it recorded, get it mixed. So we're just figuring out the project basically. Like it's very, very flexible. So we can like accommodate kids who are 16 doing the first recording, and we can accommodate really seasoned touring artists who are looking to make like a full-length record that's going to go out and potentially be heard by quite a lot of people. So yeah, I just kind of have to get my feelers out and have a quick chat with the band. Sometimes we jump on a quick call, or it's a few emails back and forth, just figuring out what the project is. It's very rare that I'm just going to send back a price and that's it. If someone gets in touch, I'm not just going to say it's this much per day. Let me know if you want it. It's just not really that kind of thing. It's a very bespoke product, so it could look many different ways. Sometimes we can get an album done over 10 days, or we could spend 5 weeks on it. It's very different. So you just got to figure out the project and really get a feel for like what you are like actually quoting for. So yeah.
So you've to kind of take the kind of process onwards, I guess. So let's say, for example, you've jumped on a call with them, had a conversation, and you've worked out that essentially the best thing for them, their budget, their experience level, is to work with you directly. and that's what they're going to do, and you've kind of agreed that, and you've sent them a price, etc., and they've agreed that. What's the next steps for them then?
They might have some homework to do. So it might be that we take a listen to some of the songs, we figure out which ones we're going to actually work on. We'll kind of put a plan together in terms of like how the session might look. So if it's like, say, if it's an album session, it's probably unlikely in this day and age that everyone's going to be there for every single day. So we might have to put a plan in place like, okay, so we're going to start with guitars, production, and vocals. So that's going to be like the first 2 weeks. So I need you guys here. And then we're going to move to bass and extras. And then we're going to do drums last. So I need your drummer like between these dates. Or it might be like a band where we're starting with drums first. And it's like, right, okay, so we need to do pre-production on these dates. And then you've got a month between pre-production and tracking to kind of like rehearse the songs. So it's like, it might be quite a long process. You know, if we're starting an album project, it might be in the works like 6 months before we even put anything down to tape, essentially. So we may have like back and forth for a few months where I'm listening to demos, giving my feedback, and then we may get together to do a few days of additional writing and kind of like really solidifying the songs. And then I'll send the band away from there and be like, right, you've got 5 weeks. Everyone needs to knuckle down on these parts. You know, like the main guitarist, you're doing all the, you know, the main rhythm tracking. Second guitarist, you're doing all the leads. So go and sharpen up on all of that. And it's just about, just figuring it all out. It's project managing really at that point. So it can look very different, but I think those are the sessions that go really well, are the ones with the plan in place. I think when sometimes through just being extremely busy, sometimes these little details get overlooked and you always kind of pay for it during the session. So there might be something that you've been meaning to say to the band for ages and you never get around to like actually having that conversation. And then during the tracking, you know, someone shows up on the wrong day and then you've got to do like, I hate doing bass first. I never do bass before guitar because, I mean, there's loads of reasons why, but I hate doing it. And then sometimes you'll schedule a session and then the bass player shows up when the guitarist is supposed to be there. And you're like, no. Where's the guitar player? Like, where's the songwriter? I need that guy. Like, I don't need you yet. Like, it's tricky. Or a lot of bands like assuming that we're going to do drums first in a very like traditional sense. But I don't know if you've heard this from anyone else, but quite often now, if I'm working on like heavily produced music, we actually do the drums very late on in the process because that gives you the ability then to make arrangement changes like right up to the very last minute. So we could be sometimes working from MIDI drums right until the last week of an album, and then we put the final drums in. And that means we can be writing drum fills and beats and little accents and crash hits and stuff that can all work around the vocal. And the thing is, like, it's so rare now that a band actually like stands in a room and has all these things worked out together. So more often than not, if you're working from essentially a guitar track with MIDI drums first, you might not hear the vocals until, you know, week 3 of an album. And then if you change things and you're stuck using the drums that you thought you needed in the beginning, you can run into all kinds of problems. So I found that, like, just letting people, just filling people in on, like, I guess, like the new way of doing things. Because if you don't, then people show up on the wrong dates and book the wrong time off work and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of organisation in the first few months of like chatting to a band.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, the whole drums essentially first or last approach is something I've come across myself, but I think a lot of bands might be quite surprised by that idea. And I think it's definitely something to consider. If you're recording yourselves at home, it's definitely something to consider, like waiting till you got everything else locked down before you consider the drums. But
yeah, I think so. My general rule of thumb is I'm going to record the songwriter first. So whoever is the main songwriter in the band, I need to work with them first, essentially. So we need to be on the same page. We need to understand what we're trying to get out of the project. We need to work through the arrangements and the structures. So sometimes you can do pre-production, get the song locked in, and then go to drums. Or you can do pre-production that essentially then turns straight into production, and you work all the way through and then do drums at the very, very end. But the thing is, it's like, until you've heard the vocal, and 9 times out of 10, I won't hear the vocal until probably we've finished the arrangement and tracked the guitars, because people are writing stuff very last minute, and I'm going to change it anyway. Like, that's just like, I know what I'm like, and I'm going to hear it, and I'm going to change it. So it's like, we might as well just do the drums at the end, because we're going to run into issues. You know, that's just the way I've it's the way I've worked for a while now, and that's the kind of producer I want to be. Is like very hands-on and actually help with the songwriting. I don't want to just sit back and like let these things go unnoticed. So it's just part of my job, essentially. So yeah, so I really like doing drums at the end, and also because the song is normally so developed and so dense at that point, I think you can get a much better drum sound that way, because you are then like tuning the drums to fight through a wall of guitars, and you know what that wall looks like. Whereas I think sometimes if you you track the drums first, they sound amazing, and then you plonk loads of guitars on top, sometimes it just completely destroys the drums. I actually mix in the same way. So I don't mix my drums first. I typically mix the guitars first and the bass, and then I push the drums through that, which is quite a weird way of working. But I think it's because I'm not a drummer. I'm a guitar player, so I know what guitars should sound like. So for me, I don't really like mixing the drums and then plonking guitar on top, because then like everything gets sort of destroyed. So I tend to like build my mix, like I kind of get this blanket of guitar and bass that essentially fills the entire frequency spectrum. You know, you're talking like a guitar and bass on a heavy track is going to be from like 60 hertz all the way up to like 5K and beyond. So it's like you've only got a limited amount of space to work within, really, you know. So I kind of get that blanket there. That's the way I sort of picture it, and then I like push the drums like through it, and like I figure out like what space is like available. But yeah, I guess that's just like, that probably stems from tracking drums last, I think. I don't know where it came from. I don't know when I really started doing that, but it's something I've been doing for a few years now, I think.
I've not heard of anyone else quite working that way, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
No, well, if it works.
Yeah, but I mean, the way I see it is like, I demonstrated it. I did like a guest lecture at Staff's Uni, and I demonstrated it there I took like a kick drum, and I was like picking out all these frequencies that like we all kind of agreed that were cool in the kick drum, and then we sort of left that to the side, put the guitars in, and then we put the kick drum in and EQ'd it again, but using frequencies that actually cut through the guitar. And then we kind of like A-B'd the two, and like the first one like didn't make its way through the guitar at all, because you're really making an assumption about what frequencies you think are going to fight through versus the ones that actually will. And sometimes you'd be really surprised. You know, you might be pushing, I don't know, on a kick drum, like you might be like pushing all these like frequencies like 3, 4, 5K, and then you put the guitar in and it's gone. But then actually, when you start sweeping around and the guitar's already in, you might find that you're actually boosting like 700, 800, 900, 1.2K, something like that. I really like that sort of like 1K range on kicks. But like in that range there's like so much space in the guitar, because you might have like a little scoop there. And there's all this like kind of like information in the kick drums that you might normally throw away, that like I'm now using, because I realize that actually, 3 and 4K is like taken by the guitars, and then sort of like above that, 8 to 10K, I don't really like that range anyway in kicks. So it's like more of my kick drums like more focused in the sort of like 1K region, where the guitars like naturally kind of scoop in. So it's just, I don't know, it's a different way of looking at it. But I just figured that like guitar and bass, especially in the type of music that I record, is like so ridiculously like overpowering that I figured, well, if we put that in and we know that that's there, then it's kind of like up to everything else to like fight through that rather than carving the guitar to like make space. So I can have like really big guitars and then figure out what's left for the drums, which is it's a lot strange, but I don't know. I guess if anyone's listening and they're into mixing, like just try it, I guess.
Well, I'm going to, because the way I always work is I get the drums in my head like sorted, you know, get them all mixed, sounding good. I've got a good ear now for, you know, where the other bits of the mix are going to kind of sit, so I can kind of work around that in my head. Get the drums in, get the guitar in, and then I have to go back to get the guitar and get the bass in, and then I always have to go back to the drums and then spend a little while rebalancing them, re-EQing them, recompressing them, kind of just changing things up. And that's a waste of time. I've just realised.
It is a waste of time, yeah, because you know, that so much information's getting masked, and it's always like the ambience, isn't it? It's like the room mics disappear. So it's like I'll like, you know, sit there. I'll normally like get the guitar, get the bass, kick and snare, get that all fighting, and then I'll bring in the cymbals, bring in the rooms, and then it's like if you solo the drums, sometimes like the room sound has to sound enormous to get through the kind of stuff that I do. So it's like you would never make the drums sound like that, I don't think. You know, that's my philosophy on it anyway.
I like it. So, moving over to a slightly different question, what is the biggest challenge that you see bands having during the production process?
I think one thing that I see quite a lot is people just getting in their own way with like egos. You know, just kind of like having a preconceived idea of how it's going to go. They don't really. It's like sometimes you'll get a band that will like say that they want feedback, but then they actually don't want it at all. You know, and I think sometimes like it's just about being open-minded in the studio, and just everyone's voice is relevant. And I think some people really get a little bit too caught up in you know, it being their way or the highway, and not being open-minded. You know, I think that's like a major problem that I see. And also, I think beyond that is just not being prepared. I tell everyone the same things, and time again, it doesn't get done. Which is, get your guitar set up, bring fresh strings, you know, bring drum heads, all these kind of things. And it's like, you know, you do a session where, like I've got like a house kit at the studio that we use, where it's just like one up, one down. So the 13-inch rack tom goes on a stand. And then had a session with a band where it was like, we're going to use 2 up, 2 down. And the guy was like, I'm bringing the toms. I was like, okay, cool. And then show up on the day with the 2 toms, but no mount to put them on. And I'm like, but we prepared for this. Like we all knew that we were doing 2 toms. And he was like, do you not have a mount? I'm like, why would I have a mount for 2 toms that I don't own in sizes that I don't own? Like we have this house kit. It's like we have this house kit, which is a great house kit, but it's like, it is what it is. Like I don't, you know, it's like you try and have everything for every scenario, but I mean, I don't have specific drum hardware, you know. So it's like it's just little things, you know. But it's also like the, you know, actually sitting down and practicing to a metronome. It's thinking about, you know, doubling the part. So people come in with an idea of what a guitar part is, and then they can't play it the same, you know, twice in a row. And strumming patterns, like, you know, like simple strumming patterns, things like that. It's like actually thinking about those details. But what I will say is, like, once people have been to the studio, you know, a couple times, like you work these things out, and then the bands just get better and better and better. So they come in more prepared every time. you know. And I think that's like really, it's really nice to see, you know, because people do take it on board. I mean, some don't, and that's frustrating when you're saying the same thing every single session. But I think if you're working with a band for the first time, you've got to expect some of these things to not be done. And maybe they've got like bad habits from other studios and things like that. You do see that, like if someone's had a long-term relationship with another producer, and then they can kind of come in sometimes with preconceived ideas of like how you might do it. And sometimes they'll be like, oh, well, such and such did this and such did this. And I'm like, but we don't do that here. Like, that's not the way we do it. And we don't do bass first. We don't do drum. I know that when I say it, it sounds insane, doesn't it? Because I do know that that's not typical, because we're not doing drums first or bass first. But the industry's different now. You know, the product is different. The expectations are different. We're competing with, you know, highly produced bands, you know, and it's like we've got to keep up. So I can if I ever do bass first, I can guarantee that we end up redoing it again after guitar. So it's just a waste of time.
Well, if you ever end up doing bass first on a record and that is the final bass take, I want you to talk about that on your social media. I want that to be a proud moment where you go, it happened.
It won't happen. It'll never happen. I'm telling you. No, but yeah, I don't, you know, I don't want to like complain about people. What that's all I'd say is that those are the only problems we run into really, is like preparation. But like I say, it always gets worked out. I don't get too stressed about it. Like, we can work out anything. And then, yeah, I just say, like, leave your ego at the door. You know, just be open-minded to everything. Like, I make some terrible suggestions sometimes, you know, and you can kind of tell sometimes that it's falling on deaf ears. But I always say to bands, like, you know, it's absolutely fine to be wrong as well. Like, we can try anything. It's like if there's a part of the song, someone, a guy in a band the other day told me that the last person that he worked with, I won't name any names, but apparently if you didn't like something about the song and you kind of raised a concern about that, the producer would just say, well, do you have anything to replace it with? And they say, well, no, not yet. And then you just say, well, it stays. And I just think that's such a horrendous attitude, because like, how are you supposed to think of a new part if one part is, you know, still in the song? Like, you need to remove that thing first. Like, say it's a synth line or something. It's like, you need to be open-minded enough to take that out and see what space there is to work with. Like, it's very hard to think of a new part if there's one occupying that space. So I think that's just such a really odd way of doing it. But, you know, there's been plenty of ideas that I've thrown out there and we've tried, and I'll be the first to say, guys, this isn't working, you know. And I'll say, like, if something isn't working in the session, just tell me. I don't care. Like, it doesn't like, there is no ego, like, at all. Like, we try things, they don't work, we move on. We just keep trying until something does work. So everyone's got a voice in the session, and I try and like make that clear. But some bands can be really, really shy about it in the beginning, and I think they don't want to say that I'm wrong. But I think once you get into that comfortable state with the band and they realise that actually you're not going to cause a fuss if they say they don't like it, then I think it just leads for a really good session that way.
I think for me, some of my favourite sessions, mixing or recording, when I occasionally get the joy of doing that kind of thing, is when a band have come to me and they've had a really bad experience in somewhere else, and I'm able to kind of give them a really good positive experience of recording or mixing. It's just, for me personally, I just find that some of the most kind of wholesome sessions, I guess. Probably you do too.
Yeah, it's a really good feeling, isn't it? It's like so validating when you know, when someone can come in and say like that they really did enjoy it. And I suppose you've got something to compare it to as well. And because, you know, like when people do move on from another producer, it's normally because there was something about it that they didn't like. And then when they end up staying with you for a long time, then it's quite validating, really. It's nice to like know that like what you're doing is resonating with the people in the way that you kind of hoped it would, you know. It's because sometimes you're in this little bubble of like working, and you don't know if what you're doing is really making much difference or not. But when people come in and they say that they're like, they really enjoy this sort of method, it's quite nice. It's very validating. So yeah, it definitely inflates my ego a little bit.
Well, that's always helpful, isn't it? So big question for you here. Big debate nowadays. Home studios versus I've written in my notes pro studios. I don't know how you describe yourself, but non-home studios, somewhere where you go and you spend some money to make a record. They have their benefits and their drawbacks, certainly for home studios. But where do you stand in that debate? What do you think's better? Is there a certain way that you think people should use home studios, that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I'm going to be biased because obviously I run a commercial studio. But I'm really like it. I think everyone's situation is different. So I think if you're the kind of band that is very, very self-sufficient and you want to keep it within your little bubble and you want to like take full control of everything that you do and you don't want outside help and you're getting good results that way, then that's absolutely fine. I think the technology is there to do it. I think you can get a fantastic result with anything, and I'm not really like, I don't really care that much about gear and stuff like that, and I'm make a record on whatever. So I think if that works for you, that works for you. It's about your workflow at the end of the day. Like, how can you argue with bands like I don't know, like Spirit Box or something like that? It's essentially putting out huge like chart topping metal hits with like MIDI drums and amp sims, and it's all just kind of like, but that works for their process, like the way that they do it, like that's what inspires them. They don't feel the need to like go beyond that, and that's absolutely fine. Like, I don't really mind. One opinion that I do have about studios versus home studios is I think if you are going to the studio and you are making the effort to go to the studio, I think it's nice to do studio things. So like making an effort to still do live drums, still do amps, still do, kind of like all those kind of studio things. Because I did flirt with the idea of going a little bit more digital for a while there, just because that's, the way the industry seems to be going, and everyone's kind of like putting these records out, and Neural DSP is incredible. And I thought to myself, well, I don't want to be left behind. I don't want to be like a dinosaur. So I should really get my head around these digital options. So I played around with like Kempers and Quad Cortex and stuff like that. But what I kind of the conclusion I kind of came to is like, people have come to the studio to do things that they can't do at home. So I think it's important to do those things where, in the typical kind of sense, I think people get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And I think the journey, if you're going to go to the effort of going to a studio and have it produced by a producer and going to let that person in on the project, I think the journey is just as important as the outcome. And I think some people in the modern production era are only focused on outcome and not focused on journey whatsoever. But I like to think that the records that we do, we have a really, really good time making them, and we try and make some kind of like, we try and make some memories while we do it, and actually have some, I guess, like studio experiences, getting in front of the cab, getting feedback, screaming into room mics on the opposite side of the room, doing, manual kind of things with pedals and reamping drums and all that kind of stuff, all that kind of like studio trickery. I still feel really like romantic about it, and I really enjoy the process of like making records. And I think outcome is one thing, but I think journey is another. But in terms of tools for home studios, like, I don't think it really matters too much. I've got a 1-year-old son, and I kind of made the decision sort of a few months before he was born that I was going to start working from home a little bit more and try and do all my mixing work from home. So I've got a home studio and do a lot of work from home, so I'm not against it whatsoever. I don't feel the need to be surrounded by all that kind of analog gear and stuff like that. I don't mix analog. I mix all in the box. So I think it'd be hypocritical of me to sort of like say anything bad about home studios, because I'm not that far off one myself. It's only really the tracking side that I keep a little bit more analog. Was that a bit? Did I sit on the fence a little bit there?
No. I think you sat in just about the right spot to my mind. I mean, the thing I always think is in this kind of mod world, especially with, say, guitarists, for example, with everyone getting modelers, and you go to gigs and there's more and more modelers being used, hit left, right, and centre, just because they're that bit more reliable. They haven't got tubes in them. When you go to the studio, if you can get into the room and go, look, there's, I don't know, a real Marshall that I'm going to play through, for example, it's just that experience of it that really makes the difference. Is that the kind of thing that you don't necessarily get anywhere else nowadays?
Yeah. When we start like picking amps, normally, I've got like 3 or 4 amps on the switcher and then a couple of cabs plugged in, and we'll kind of have the doors open. And, the guitarist will be playing like super loud, and like everyone's face in the room is like loving it. And you're just not going to get that, are you, by like pulling up an IR and like scrolling through presets and be like, oh, cool, like we're using such and such's preset from this album. Great, good for them. Like, like why I want to create like a bespoke tone that other people try and emulate. I don't want to emulate someone else's tone. I want people to try and emulate my tone. So we're always trying to chase that and get weird combinations of different amps and things. But yeah, I think doing studio things in the studio is fun, like typical studio things. I think that's not lost on me yet. I still really enjoy that.
I would agree with you there. What would you say is the biggest headache of owning your own studio? I'm sure there's lots.
Yeah, where do I begin? Energy companies. Dealing with utility bills and things like that, like the massive electric price hike of last April was absolutely crippling, and I don't want to say almost put me out of business, but it was really tough to get through, getting through the massive hike in cost of living. I think it was last April, wasn't it? Or was it the one before? When we went through that massive adjustment where basically every bill went up for everyone, that was like a huge thing. And, as a studio owner, you can't just double your rates overnight, but my expenses had basically doubled. So it's like my electric bill had gone from 19 pence kilowatt to £1 17 pence kilowatt. And in the winter, that was astronomical. It's just like little things like that. It's things like that people wouldn't notice. It's like the huge overheads of having a property like that. It's like having a second house. But even, to be honest, it costs way more than my house. It costs a lot more than, I won't say exactly how much, but it's like if you own a home and pay a mortgage, having a studio is like way more than that. So it's like, it is difficult. I'd say it's that, and it's having to really, I just want to be creative. I want to spend my days just doing creative tasks, but some days are taken up by calling the waste disposal people, calling the internet provider, calling the electric company. It's like things like that, dealing with neighbours, dealing with the council, dealing with people vandalising things outside the property. And it's like all those things that surround the business that are just day-to-day running of the business kind of tasks, which are quite hard. It's chasing people for late payments and all those kind of things. Those things are not enjoyable, but really you have to do all of that to then enjoy making the music. But really, I want to spend all day just doing creative things. But sometimes, you have to go and deal with other kind of business things. But Yeah, I don't begrudge it though. Like I don't not enjoy it, and I do enjoy running a business, and I enjoy watching the growth of the business. I really enjoy that side of it. So like thinking of ways to improve it. But it's just a very expensive endeavor, and you always feel like that you're at the end of it, and then you kind of get fixated on something else. So it's like, I've renovated the studio like 3 or 4 times, and I thought I was done, and then all of a sudden I got this like niggling little feeling that maybe we could be doing better with the acoustic design. So then all of a sudden I'm like, now I'm down that rabbit hole at the moment, and thinking about changing the whole live room. And yeah, you always think that you're done, and then you're not. But I do love that kind of growth, and I love that sort of drive to always make it better.
The kind of life admin and business admin tasks, that, to be honest, they're never going to be as fun as the kind of I don't know what's called them, the kind of improvement jobs that you could do. For example, like we're going to sort out the acoustics or improve the acoustics. I'm thinking about investing in this particular piece of gear that I think can get me a different sound. That kind of thing is always going to be more exciting than I need to work out which energy provider I'm going to use. But there we are. It's part of the job, isn't it?
Yeah, it's part of the job. But it is what it is. You've got to do it to enjoy the fun stuff. I just try and do that stuff in the afternoon. Like I try and like get up and be creative like in the morning. I'm very much like an early bird, so I want to do all my mixing work and kind of creative tasks like first thing in the morning, and then when I've kind of like run out of energy in the afternoon, then I'll be like, right, time to get business hat on now and deal with the running of the property. But yeah, there's always something to be done.
Very different question to that. Which production, this might be very difficult for you, which production are you most proud of? And this is not me saying which bands do you hate. It's nothing like that for anyone listening. It's which production are you most proud of?
I think realistically, the one that springs to mind straight away is Graphic Nature's first record, A Mind Waiting to Die. Just because of the impact it seems to have had. Like it's reaching people that I never thought it ever could. Like, that record just seems to keep going and going and going, and what it seems to mean to people is like so nice as well. I think sometimes you don't always realize like what you're creating in the moment, but then when you see what it means to like the kids who love that band, I just think it's really hit in a different way to what I was expecting. Like, it's a heavy record, and I knew it was going to hit a certain audience, but I didn't really realize it was going to resonate with people on such like an emotive level as well. But that's nothing to do with me. That's Harvey, the singer. His lyrics on that record are incredible, and I just think it's hitting a different spot to what a lot of other heavy music is. I think like that combination of heavy music, but with like more heartfelt lyricism and openness towards like mental health. I think to see what that means to some of those kids is really cool, and it's like that's the reason why you get into this, isn't it? It's like it's not so much like you can look at the numbers and go like, wow, look how many people listen to this record, but actually it's like which people listen to it. And I think when I've seen them at like festivals and stuff and seen like what kind of kids were watching them and what it meant to those people, it's just like really nice to think that actually like 15 years after me being one of those kids and watching a band that meant a lot to me, it's like incredible to see people just resonating with that band. So I'm really proud of that, because it just seems to have, it's just done more than I thought it was going to. Basically, it's gone like all around the world, and I've like done mixing. I've done mixing projects from bands all the way over in Russia based on that record, and I've done a mix for an American band, a mix for a Polish band, a mix for a Russian band, and this is all based on that record. And to think that like some kid would be sitting in their bedroom in Poland thinking, oh, we'll get Sam Bloor to mix this is absolutely insane to me.
From Stoke-on-Trent.
Yeah, in Stoke-on-Trent. Yeah, it's absolutely insane to me that someone on the other side of the world, in Eastern Europe or over in America, would think the one person in the world that we want to work on this is a kid from Stoke-on-Trent. That's mental to me. That's like never, that's never going to get lost on me, I don't think. But yeah, so I think that one I'm really proud of, just sonically and just from what it's done, basically. But I'm proud. I'm proud of all my artists. Like, I've got a really good relationship with like so many people, and it's become a really good community, especially like in Stoke and the Midlands as well. Because obviously a lot of my work is still based, where I am in the country, and there's just an amazing like community around the studio. It's fantastic, really. It's a little family.
My last question for you, we've kind of reached that point already, is what is your best piece of advice for bands nowadays? It doesn't have to be about production. It can be about absolutely anything you would want to say.
Best piece of advice for bands? That's tricky, really, because I've never been very successful as a musician myself, I've always been in bands, but I've never like achieved any great success as a musician. So I can only really give advice based on what I see in the studio. And one thing that I will say is there's a lot of things that bands are doing now. They're doing TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and they're doing a lot of like trying to get on like really beat the algorithm and get on like certain Spotify playlists and stuff like that. But one thing that I think stands true is that the best music always rises to the top. So I think as important it is to get your social media right and to have a social media presence, all the bands that I've seen that have really resonated with people were all just writing great music. And for me, I think that is the most important thing. The other things will help to sell that music, but you're never going to fake your way to the top with like subpar music, I don't think. And all of the stuff that I've seen firsthand that's really connected with people has always just been great music that has found its way through, all the noise, essentially. So don't get too hung up on TikTok and stuff like that. Definitely do your fair share of it, but don't skimp on good songwriting. That's probably what I would say.
I entirely agree. Entirely agree. Make that your first priority as a band or as an artist.
Yeah, I think it always rises to the top.
Wow. Well, Sam, if anyone wants to work with you, where should they go? How can they find you?
Just find me on Instagram, Sam Bloor Producer, or you can go to my website and fill out a form, which is sambloorproducer.com.
Nice. Well, there will be links in the show notes below. I'm pointing down even though I'm not on a podcast player right now. But there will be links down there and you can go down there and go find those links. Sam, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Wow, I think there's lots of really, really good takeaways from that interview. It may encourage you to do something different in your next production, or it may encourage you to want to go and work with Sam directly. And if you want to, as I've just said, there is information in the show notes below. So go and explore and have a conversation with him. I'm sure he will love it. That is it for another episode of the Music Survival Guide. So if you liked it, please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It all helps the algorithm, I'm sure you do. Please also share it with any friends and bandmates if you thought it was useful or interesting. There are little bits that maybe think, we should apply that to our next record. If you think about recording or mixing and you want to talk about it, feel free to reach out to me or to Sam via the links in my podcast description below, and I will see you next time.